Two films, distinct in story. One film follows Teddy Daniels, a U.S. Marshal who is investigating the disappearance of a patient at a hospital for the criminally insane. The other film follows Ode-soo, a man who is kidnapped and held in a hotel room for 15 years, finally released and pursuing the one who put him there. So what makes these films memorable? Some say it's their twist endings. Spoilers, Teddy Daniels, that U.S. Marshal, is actually Andrew Latis, a patient of the hospital being allowed by the doctors to act out his U.S. Marshal delusion in a final attempt to make him accept the reality that his wife drowned their children, and then he killed her in his despair. In Ode-soo, every step of his revenge quest was actually an elaborate plan orchestrated by Woo Jen, the man who captured him in the first place, in order to cause Dae-soo to commit incest with his own daughter. Unexpected endings can make quite an impact, and trust me, I didn't see those endings coming in the slightest. However, I believe what makes these films so memorable is something far less obvious. In today's episode of Meta Picture Show, we are going to be deconstructing a dream sequence from each film and trying to answer the question, what makes these films so memorable? Let's look at the first dream sequence in Shutter Island, directed by Martin Scorsese. After expressing his belief that something is off at the hospital, Teddy goes to sleep and dreams of his dead wife, Dolores.
I found a whole stack of these, Teddy. Jesus, are you ever sober anymore?
He killed a lot of people in the war.
Is that why you drink?
Are you real?
No. She's still here.
Who? Rachel?
She never left. Remember when we stayed in the cabin in the summer, Teddy? We were so happy. She's here. You can't leave.
I'm not gonna leave. I love you so much.
I'm just bones in a box, Teddy.
No.
I am. You have to wake up.
Go. You're here.
I'm not. You have to face that. But she is. So is he.
Who?
Latest. I have to go.
Please, I need to hold on to you. Just a little bit longer.
God,
please.
You have to let me go.
I can't.
Okay, let's rewind. What do we notice about this dream sequence? It begins like a concrete memory, a time when Dolores is confronting Teddy about his drinking. We are led to believe we will be getting some exposition into Teddy's past. And stop. Did you see it? Let's look again. There, the bottle disappears from her hand. Right up front, Scorsese is signaling that what we were led to believe the dream was about, the external conflict around Teddy's drinking, is not what is actually important here. The bottle literally disappears from the frame, the image is discarded, and the conversation is abandoned as the scene shifts.
She's still here.
Dolores is talking about Rachel here, but knowing that Dolores is actually Rachel, it is implied that the memory of his wife and Teddy's mental state are the real purpose for the dream sequence, as that is where Scorsese has shifted our attention. The dream sequence is not a memory, it is a subconscious space to explore Teddy's mental state. This subtle editing trick is a clever cue by Scorsese. He is priming the audience for the twist ending. He leads us in through a false start, letting us believe the story we should be paying attention to is the external conflict around Teddy's drinking. Then he shifts to what should be our real focus, Teddy's mental state. If we apply this framework to the entire film, Scorsese is cluing us in that just like in the dream, what we were led to believe the film was about, the external conflict around the missing patient, is also a false start. The real focus of the film, just like the dream, is Teddy's mental state and his emotional journey to resolve his guilt. And look at how Scorsese shows us Teddy's guilt. He continually draws focus to Teddy's hands. Here, a push in for more emphasis. In fact, within 8 seconds, we get 5 different shots where Teddy's hands are the center of the frame or the focus. Why is this important? Let's go back to the first time we see Teddy's hands. They are here, holding on to his wife. In Macbethian fashion, her blood is literally on his hands. So if the dream space is a representation of Teddy's subconscious, then now we know Teddy feels responsible for the death of his wife. And in the same way Teddy can't let go of his guilt, Scorsese brings us back to Teddy's hands, over and over again, making us experience Teddy's state of mind, unable to move past his grief. I mean, look, here the world is literally burning down around him, and all Teddy focuses on are his hands. All he can connect with is his guilt, and Scorsese mirrors that guilt by having the camera linger on Teddy's hands. It's this unwillingness to let go that is preventing Teddy from connecting with reality. And similarly in Oldboy, director Park Chan-wook uses a dream sequence to show the mental state of Woo Jen before he commits suicide. Right before this dream, Woo Jen has just revealed that he believes Dae-soo is responsible for Woo Jen's sister's death. So Woo Jen arranged the series of events leading Dae-soo to sleep with his own daughter. Woo Jen then leaves Dae-soo in his despair and gets on the elevator.
혜진아, 그동안 무서웠지? 그러니까 나는 좀...
This dream sequence follows more closely to a direct memory. However, we know it is still a representation of Woo-jin's subconscious because of this right here. Adult Woo-jin seamlessly replaces the child Woo-jin in the notion that the anguish he felt as a child is still just as painful. Like Scorsese, Park is using the dream sequence to explore Woo-jin's mental state. And within both dream sequences, both Dolores and Soo-ah alternate between asking to be remembered and asking to be let go.
Remember when we stayed in the cabin in the summer, Teddy? We were so happy.
나 기억해줘야 돼. 알았지? You have to let me go. 그러니까 나는 좀...
This is because, more than representing actual characters, Dolores and Soo-ah are representations of Teddy and Woo-jin's internal conflict. To take it a step further in illustrating this point, both directors reduce the female characters to inanimate objects. Here, Scorsese reduces Dolores by having her tell Teddy,
I'm just bones in a box, Teddy.
and here, Park flattens Soo-ah to another box, diminishing her to a still, grainy photograph, merely a shade of her actual self. By keeping the women as sketches of characters instead of fully fleshed out, Scorsese and Park are highlighting the subjectivity of the dream sequences. The effect is these are not scenes being played between two characters. Instead, Dolores and Soo-ah are projections of Teddy and Woo-jin's respective subconsciouses, and both men are grappling with the decision to accept reality, which means experiencing the full burden of their guilt. This struggle provides the internal conflict Teddy and Woo-jin face. And in Woo-jin's subconscious, we learn that the grief is more real to him than the real world. If we look at the opening and closing shots of the dream sequence from Oldboy, we get bookends which illustrate Woo-jin's mental state. Woo-jin stands in the elevator in reality, but his grief is so strong it intrudes into the frame. Park gives us the physical image of Soo-ah's arm, pulling Woo-jin into the dream. Compare this to the shot of the dream, where Woo-jin mimes cocking a non-existent gun and pulling the trigger. After we cut back to reality, we learn that the gun was real and Woo-jin has killed himself. However, by giving us a tangible representation of the dream, Soo-ah's arm, in reality, and depriving us of a concrete representation of reality, the gun, in the dream sequence, Park is illustrating what Woo-jin perceives more readily: his grief. Scorsese showed us what held more weight with Teddy, too. Remember when Teddy couldn't tear his eyes away from his hands, refusing to connect with anything but his guilt? So the dream sequences explicitly state the character's internal conflict. Wake up and face reality. Come to terms with the truth. Let go of the guilt. Deal with the grief. And this is key to understanding why the films are so memorable. The internal conflict represented in the dreams. Yes, the endings had unforeseen twists, but the reasons why the endings are memorable is not the twists. It's the incongruency we experience in the stories. You see, Teddy resolves his external conflict. He solves the missing persons case, he is successful in learning the truth about Shutter Island, yet he fails to resolve his internal conflict, his grief, choosing instead to be lobotomized. And likewise in Oldboy, Woo-jin succeeds in his external conflict. His elaborate plan works perfectly. He evens the score with Dae-soo, but it does not settle his internal conflict, his grief, and afterwards he shoots himself. As an audience member, we are used to films giving us resolution and catharsis. Typically, the external conflict ends, which leads to character growth, so the internal conflict can be resolved. But these movies categorically deny it any internal resolution. Both Teddy and Woo Jen, despite achieving their goals, choose death. It is this tension between the successfully completed external conflict and the unresolved internal conflict that causes our thoughts to continually return to these films, ruminating on the incongruity like an unsolvable problem. Something amiss. In this way, Shutter Island and Oldboy are riddles with no solution. Purposefully designed to be inconsistent, and as we cannot make sense of the inconsistency, we are left to turn these films over in our minds, trying to process the unfathomable, just like Teddy and Woo Jen. And this is what makes these films memorable. Hi there, my name's Rebecca Barker, but my friends call me Chani, so you should do the same. Thanks for watching my very first video essay. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. If you have a moment, go check out my Patreon page. Thank you so much.